So this is your opportunity to kind of participate, play your part, and ask some clever people challenging questions. So, gentleman there, there's a mic. There's a mic there coming to you.
Thank you very much for a set of very interesting presentations. My name is Jason Devereaux from UCL and Lloyd's Register. When I was asked, when I was at the Robbins Institute, to look at the effects of the recession on multinational enterprises for the International Labour Organization, we found a number of very interesting findings in relation to safety culture, fatigue, psychosocial hazard assessment, companies taking their eye off the ball, so to speak, because of the financial pressures and the impact on occupational safety and health. Do you have any comments about what your observations have been during the recession and how it's particularly affected the energy sector? This report has just been published by the International Labour Organization on these issues, and I haven't heard any mention of the recessionary impact yet. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on that. Thanks.
All right, the oil and gas industry, I think, have been very lucky, actually. We've been less affected by the recession than most industries. I'm from central Scotland, and industry in that area has been decimated. You know, the mines, the breweries, the distilleries, that's mills, various industries there that were the backbone of central Scotland are no longer there. And the oil and gas industry seems to be going from strength to strength, albeit it's changed shape quite dramatically. You know, we're looking at developments that exploit stranded, what would have been before uneconomical. You know, we're now looking at different techniques. I think we've got more efficient as an industry. Yeah, I think we've been relatively lucky in our industry that we're in a bit of a bubble.
Yeah. I could add to that. If you look at I guess I can't comment on the recession impact on the energy sector, but when we look at financial impact on considerations for the human factors element, I certainly have first-hand experience of engineers, designers, and the perception of human factors tied to economics, the result of which is that human factors is overlooked because they have the piece of kit there, they have it, it's functioning, so the piece of kit that they're trying to use or install or develop is there, it's functioning. I believe that there's often a sense that consideration of the human element is something that's almost a costly extra that doesn't need to happen before the product goes to market or is used.
Can I just add one point to that? I mean, I think if you go and look at the Oil and Gas UK's economic report and their demographic survey, you know, record amounts, something like 13 billion being invested this year, with over 25,000 people actively employed offshore in core positions. So what you have is an industry that's actually working, you know, at a higher capacity than perhaps, you know, the rest of the UK, and that creates its own challenges, of course. Gentleman there with it.
Thank you. My name is Steve Clark. I'm a safety engineer, professional safety engineer. What I haven't heard so far is any mention of the word interface. And that interface applies to systems, organisations. It refers also to the ability to think in systems terms and to understand those interfaces. My experience in design safety is that major problems arise more at the interface level than anything else. Systems are designed to work in certain ways, organisations are designed to work in certain ways, but they don't necessarily interface correctly in all situations. I just wondered what the panel's feelings on that were. Thank you.
David.
Yeah, good point. I mean, I don't think it was explicit in the presentation, the word interface, but there was a clear link between man-machine interface, a human interface with equipment, control rooms, etc., safety critical handovers. All of these are interface points. I mean, clearly, I think you've touched on a good point. Contractor interface is a big issue in terms of the importation of risk that you don't fully understand. So I think the industry needs to shape up to that particular challenge. Yeah.
Thank you,
Sorry, I've got Izzy. Got Andy here at the front.
Good morning, Andy Brown from the Engineering Construction Industry Training Board. The word culture was mentioned in at least one of the presentations, and in previous organisations that Neil will be familiar with. The idea of a no blame culture was tried to to permeate through the organisation. A very defined organisation, not a contracting industry such as oil and gas. How does the steering group see, one of the key elements of human factors, as mentioned in First Steps, is listening to the workforce? Does the steering group acknowledge that maybe this is one of the biggest challenges, or have you seen examples of listening and people being able to come forward and talk to supervisors and managers about issues as that started to come through?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I go offshore pretty regularly and I speak to the safety reps. Also on the step change leadership team, and we engage with the safety reps through the G12. And I do really see a real open culture in many installations. I was only offshore yesterday and had an audience with some safety reps, and to be honest, I've never heard this year or the last couple of years of any kickback. There's a real appetite for workforce engagement. And I think through the workforce engagement toolkit and the workforce involvement groups, that's really coming through. So culture is certainly on the up, without a shadow of a doubt. I think the biggest bit of feedback I get is about confusion. It's trying to understand processes, procedures, control of works, systems, too many forums, too many toolbox talk forums. It's different, this platform, that platform. But what I don't see is sort of lack of open door policy or lack of no blame, just culture. When people do get things wrong, I think the feedback I get for the reps is they're fairly treated. The workforce feel they're fairly treated. Yeah.
I think that, I would add to that part of the culture that you're referring to was the ability for the people to interact with the organisation, whether that's autonomously or in a direct manner. And I think that one of the facets that this tool offers us is not only ability to provide individuals to get a better understanding of human factors and an ability to kind of, as Les said, bridge that gap between kind of theoretical to practical application. But its also aim is a kind of listening tool. So, we can engage within the organisation or the industry, get feedback, and really, promote this listening and develop a culture.
Can I just,
Catherine?
I'd just like to echo what Dave says, because of course, as an inspector, you go offshore, you always meet with the safety reps. And so far I have, found there's an open door policy, there is communication, people are able to raise concerns. But I just want to say there are still pockets of bad practice out there. There are, I'm not saying this is across the board. There's good practice certainly, but there are also pockets of bad practice, and we have to tackle that as the regulator. But from my research background and from being engaged with the industry and looking at measuring safety culture, I can see a change. When we started doing surveys back in the early 90s, there was definitely a blame culture in place. But I think through the activities of step change, through the activities of the industry itself, I think there has been a movement away. But I would just say there's still some problems out there, and we have to tackle those.
I was just going to say, I guess we've come a long way actually as an industry. I think back to in the mid-80s when I first started going offshore, the offshore installation manager was a guy who wore a shirt and tie, sat in behind a closed door in an office that you very rarely saw in the plant, and who you'd have called Mr. whatever his surname was, whereas now the relationship the supervisors, managers, onshore and offshore have, in general, I would say, I can only speak from my own experience, is much more informal, relaxed. People will be much more willing to bring things to your attention on a one-to-one. And in fact, I've witnessed it numerous times where people are very comfortable with coming speaking to you about something that they may have brought up through the line and feel it's not been addressed. So that to me is a huge leap forward from where we were in the 80s.
So yeah, just to add two points I think that's important. So the Workforce Engagement Toolkit, that exists. We've actually done an initial analysis of over 4,500 industry respondents to that, and there are two things about what's quite important to come out with. First thing is, in industry, we actually can relatively easily and frequently challenge, let's say, an unsafe condition, be it a piece of plant and equipment or procedure that we think is wrong, but actually we still find it quite difficult to challenge unsafe behaviour in our colleagues. So that interface between sort of two human beings is still the difficult thing in terms of just how that constant challenge, so there's room to improve there. The second thing when we talk about just culture is actually the HSE's WIG, Workforce Involvement Group, has a work topic of improving our just culture process, because to sort of develop Catherine's point, there is, let's say, some dark corners out there where they see just culture as a really good process for getting rid of the right person or the wrong person, and actually it should be about learning and actually applying a consistent, fair model for accountability and responsibility as opposed to no blame. So there is work in both areas, so it's ongoing.
Thank you.
So. We've got Shama.
Hello, sorry, you can't see me, so I'll stand up. I'm Shama Egbe. I'm the Safety Culture and Behavioural Lead for Talisman Sinopec. With reference to the no-blame culture point that Catherine was touching on, I think we have, I agree with that we've come a very long way with respect to no-blame culture. But also, I think in some cases, we've gone overboard with the no-blame culture. So I guess most of the companies are now at a point where we're facing a challenge between how we balance fairness and being fair and being just with the no blame. So I'd like the panel to share some views on that. How do we balance that?
So Shama, I think so that's not something that sits on the step change agenda, but it is sitting in the OIAC, the HSE's Offshore Industry Advisory Committee's Workforce Involvement Group, which has tripartite bodies, so Step Change, Oil and Gas UK, member companies, safety reps, the unions are all sitting and trying to work exactly that issue to try and address it. So they have a meeting on the 5th of September. I've been tasked with giving an update, so perhaps at the safety rep event in November I can give you an update as to where we're at on that, if that's okay. Okay.
Can I
yep.
Sham, I agree that's a very, very challenging area. I mean, I can only again go back to research background and what I've learned, and I think Professor James Reason suggested that one way to establish whether somebody should really be held accountable for their action was to use the substitution test. Have you come across that? Yep. So, but I don't know how well that would work in practice. Again, it's all very fine in theory. If somebody of the same experience, background, skills put in that same position, what would they have done? How would they have behaved? But how well that works in practice, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yep. Carl.
Morning all. Thinking ahead then, so we have the tool, we've got it in use, year, 2 years go by. How do you perceive what the next steps will be in how we use all this information that we're generating? Is there maybe some sort of user group or something like that to sort of follow up?
Dave, do you want to pick it up?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some discussion around that. I think we are talking about a training and development course. There is no course out there that kind of covers this, so that's kind of aimed at raising the industry's, broadening the industry's awareness. So that's one aspect to it, but we're really looking for the sort of member companies of Oil and Gas UK and Step Change to be engaged and bring this stuff to life. I mean, if no point in having company core values that says safety is a top priority and human factors is a clear part of that, but do nothing about it. So the industry should be looking to hold companies accountable. So we're trying to broaden it through education and sort of holding industry leaders to account to drive this within their organisations. Whether we're successful or not remains to be seen. But I do think the sort of next steps we're thinking is a sort of training and development programme aimed at probably industry leaders and practitioners.
Neil.
I'll add a little bit to that. I think, just again, going back to the tool, the tool will be able to give us a feel for what's going on in the environment and what's going on in the industry and the organisations. But one of the things I'm pretty excited about is that when we get all this information in through the tool, one of the things that we'll be able to do, indeed plan on doing, is kind of slicing and dicing that data. So we've put in up front, there's kind of rough demographics, so onshore, offshore, workforce management, departments, etc. So one thing I'll be really interested in is to see the difference in perceptions and understandings of human factors throughout the organisation on demographics line. And I hope that that will provide some really powerful kind of statistics and numbers and be really thought-provoking that will influence the next steps.
So one of the opportunities in the tool is actually there's kind of an organisational and an individual feel to it, Carl. So as an individual, you can interact to see how you experience human factors. But actually, we 3 years ago we asked for organisations to identify human factors champions, and that exists, but in a very weak forum. The tool actually helps us create a stronger forum of kind of administrators. That will then give us organisational information, which will ultimately lead to some kind of perspective on industry in terms of where the gaps are, where the interventions need to be, and in particular, improvements. And so the tool should give us information to drive further improvements. That's the hope.
Just add to that. I mean, one of the challenges we face as well is most companies badge this sort of stuff up in their own way and kind of make it complex. So, I mean, what I find working in a company with Group PSN with 17 major clients is they all do the same thing differently. And, people are a bit bamboozled by the complex processes and interactions offshore. So, I mean, I'd really like, the industry to embrace, if we're getting people from various companies coming together, subject matter experts and operational people who agree on a kind of common way, common vision, is let's get on the bus and stop trying to rebrand stuff and call it our own and make it somehow different but the same. And I think the industry's confused by that approach. And it's not just human factors, it's in many aspects of how we manage our business.
It's one good thing about the tool, actually, that the question sets have been generated by people who are knowledgeable in the topics, but they're written in very simple language that doesn't imply any knowledge of human factors to be able to answer the questions. And the kind of preamble that's at the start of every question set, on its own, will raise awareness and understanding of what human factors are. So the more people we can get involved in filling in the question sets, and you get the data as the output, but also you're raising general awareness amongst which a glossy brochure doesn't do.
Any further questions? Oh, yeah.
Hello, George Pertley from Total, Human Factors Engineer. What the question is for yourself, Catherine, we're the same as Tom. We have onshore assets and offshore assets. Is there going to be a common approach? Because there seems to be a slightly different approach from human factors from a COMA point of view to the safety gains point of view. Another point is from the lessons learned, because we're kind of further down the road onshore. What we've been working on is major accident hazard scenarios, safety critical tasks, human error analysis, and there's a lot of lessons learned, mainly because we found in one of our sites the guys have been there since it was commissioned, and what we're finding is a lot of knowledge is in their head. It's not written down. These guys are now retired. We've pulled them out of retirement. They're now as a specialist, but these guys were busy kind of vacuuming all that knowledge out and getting it down in paper. So I think there's a lessons learned there, but it's really to find is there a common approach between offshore and not, because it does allow us to get our systems a bit better aligned,
Yeah, I'd answer that by saying the human factors problems are the same whatever industry you're working in, and it certainly is the approach of the HSE to be joined up on that in terms of dealing with COMA sites and the offshore environment. So we are hoping to achieve a consistency there in our approach. So does that answer your question? I mean, that's what we're aiming to achieve. It makes absolute sense. I agree. I agree with you. It needs to be joined up in that sense.
Yeah, it just allows us to progress, because there was a bit of pressure onshore, but there's not the same pressure offshore, so we've got to do it internally. Some help from the regulator would be be nice sometimes as well.
Yeah,
you know.
and that's what we are working towards. Yeah.
And George, you're the first human factors engineer I've met. Yeah. Well done for that.
Okay, any more questions, or would you? Oh, one more. Sorry, I'll take one more before we go for break.
Hi, my name is Miles Fraser. I'm a production operator and safety rep for Talisman Cinepec on the Film Alpha platform. It's more of a statement really than a question in terms of human factors. I think workforce engagement is a hugely important key part of that. You know, if we can take learnings from offshore in particular from the workforce, we'll probably get this right.
I don't think anybody would disagree with that.
No, I totally agree. Yeah.
No, I totally agree, and that's the kind of position of step change. I think everybody agrees with that. And you know, I guess guys like Tom and myself, I spent 20 years in the field, so and after now 17 years onshore, people are starting to listen. You know. So yeah, I mean, I think it's hugely important, without a shadow of a doubt. So fully agree with your statement.
I think there's an opportunity there as well. I think what you've said is absolutely correct, but because human factors is about humans, there's an inherent interest there, you know, because it's all about the individuals and the environments they work in. So we should absolutely take that stance and then capitalise on the kind of cheating edge we've got, because we've got that inherent interest in human factors and humans' ability to perform well.
Can I just add something to what Dave said, and generally in terms of workforce engagement involvement, it's more than just listening. Okay, it's not just listening, it's taking on board what is being said and doing something about it. And if it's not possible to do something about it, to explain why. I mean, this is what I found as a problem in the past. Issues were raised, things weren't dealt with, but no reason was ever given for why the issues raised were not dealt with. So it's more than just listening. It's about doing something, and if it's not possible to do something, to explain why. So, as I say, it's engagement in both ways, in a communication, open communication channels, explanation, etc. Yeah.
Okay, if there are no more questions, can I please ask you to go and help yourself to coffee, thank our panel